Hello again from Explosive Edge Athletics. I'm Shawn Myszka, Athletic Performance Director here of Explosive Edge in Edina, Minnesota, and welcome to our new home. One of the places that you'll find me here today is our new sandbox, and I'm going to have Nick quickly scroll over and show you just this little training tool that we're going to be discussing here today. It's something pretty simple that we put together, and we put together this little sandbox out of necessity. Your kids might actually have one in your backyard that you can use, or you might take your athletes anywhere from a beach standpoint or to a local park to use this very, very simple tool that I have found a lot of benefit with. Now, like I said, this tool came to us out of necessity. One of our athletes who had sustained a shin injury, major shin injury, during her spring volleyball season, came to us in the summer, and I realized that I had to still find a way to get her to jump and get a high frequency and high number of jumps, but without sustaining the eccentric loading and the stress that comes with that eccentric loading repeatedly over and over and over again, especially early in her summer. So we were able to get rid of that shin injury, but still develop the rate of force development properties that we needed from her from a jumping standpoint and get those adaptations out of her. What we have found that in short term, even though there isn't a lot of research in regards to sand vertical jumping and the responses and adaptations that can occur, what I have found through the use of myotest that we can actually change the rate of force development properties and the way that they develop force. We actually have changed their force time curves in very short periods of time by allowing their body to decrease the time to peak force. So they develop more force in less time and essentially change that force time curve so they create greater impulse output, which is a change of momentum, which is essentially what we're looking for from a jump concentric standpoint. The other added benefit to this is that what I found is that we can also more aptly teach landing mechanics, and we can do that very, very simply without them having to worry about that high volume of ground contact time. So jumping in this pit has a lot of advantages. It can be very forgiving on the joints, as well as all the connective tissue and the whole musculotendinous component that can be very, very forgiving on. So we can use to take away from that eccentric. Most people hear me talking about eccentric stress and eccentric loading all the time from a shock plyo standpoint, and even with some of our weight training movements that we use with eccentrics. But what we have found that this is a great way to transition them out of that eccentric and start to develop more force in less time and try to change that accelerated process. What we find with the sand is, of course, it's harder to move. So the muscle actually takes more of the blunt of the movement than does the connective tissue or the tendons. But in order to move out of this sand, we can emphasize greater arm action. So if I have an athlete that has a hard time utilizing their arms when they jump, specifically on a standing vertical jump or even on their approach jump, we can start to get them to use their arm action to a greater extent to get them out of the sand. Also, like I said, because it is so concentric in nature, I have found, or it's my hypothesis of mine, that we have greater muscle fiber recruitment. But we have to be very, very careful, and I'll talk about that in a bit as far as how often we incorporate this. And another added benefit is because this sand is a very unstable surface at times and it can slip through your toes, I feel that it can really help develop the foot strength, especially those intrinsic foot muscles that sometimes don't get worked when we have a heavy shoe on, or even a shoe of any sort. So even if we were to do barefoot training, it doesn't give quite the same effect because the body's always going to want to hold back a little bit if we're jumping on a harder surface. Now, even though it does have a great amount of advantages that I have found, it also has some disadvantages. Of course, because they're jumping in the sand and it's not as hard or compliant of a surface, is we really decrease the ability of the stress shortening cycle. There is really no stress shortening cycle taking place in this box. So it's important to distinguish between the fact that something can be plyometric versus something that's jump training. Jumping in this box is not plyometric whatsoever. And it's mostly muscular in nature. Mostly will involve the mechanics of jumping rather than the actual plyometric contribution. So we got to be careful that we don't change the way that we want the athlete to be developing force, so we don't change that motor unit recruitment to too great a degree. So that can happen very quickly in this, so we got to make sure that we only use this for very short cycles, as we would anything else. The other thing is, because it is muscular in nature, is this can be very fatiguing. So we have to be careful that we keep the reps single response, we keep long rest periods, and when I say single response, I just mean one rep at a time and then taking a short break or a short rest of maybe 5 to 10 seconds before we complete the next rep. So at that time, as a coach or as a trainer, you can get good coaching cues in and really try to teach the athlete what they should be doing, where they should be positioning their body, how they should be landing, and the like. The other thing with this box, and obviously we had to build one, but sometimes people don't have access to it. But that really becomes a moot point, being that we can find these pretty much anywhere. And this was a relatively cheap way for us to continue to have our jumping happen in that athlete that was injured. And we have started to use it with athletes that are not of an injured capacity as well. So again, how do we use it? Well, with our strength or power jumpers, if you have your athletes that are strength or power jumpers, typically we know that they put out enough power, they jump with enough strength. So this could be a tool that could actually take them a step back as far as making them more elastic or reactive. However, in those strength and power jumpers that are very slow to still develop force, that they might reach an overall velocity at the moment of takeoff very well, but their transition period from downward to upward motion is very, very slow, or they develop force very slowly, we can start to increase those abilities like I alluded to earlier. So in strength power jumpers, that's how we use it. An elastic reactive jumper, somebody who doesn't develop force very easily, but they're very springy, bouncy, etc. We might use this type of jump application for them, but really start to load it. So we can use dumbbells, obviously, in this pit. We can also use weighted vests, and we can use that to develop more force and teach them how to essentially put out more force throughout the entire concentric end. So it really becomes very muscular based for them, especially when they're more of an elastic reactive jumper and they just need more muscular force or muscular strength. I know that this was a relatively short video that's going to try to hopefully hit home a few points that we've been using here, a couple new things. I would really implore researchers and as well as practitioners alike to start using this a little bit more and start investigating ways that we can change jumping application from this standpoint. Shawn Myszka, Explosive Edge Athletics. You can find this explosiveedgeathletics.com, or feel free to give us a jingle at 952-746-9003. Any questions that you have, feel free to hit me up. If not, we'll talk to you soon. Thank you.